The Continental Soccer Association is coming to Springfield. It's all here. Fast kicking, low scoring, and ties. You bet.
Hey, Dad, how come you never taken us to see a soccer game?
I don't know.
You'll see all your favorite soccer stars, like Arriaga, Arriaga 2, Bariaga, Aruglia, and Pizzozza.
Oh, I never heard of those people.
And they'll all be signing autographs. Woohoo! This match will determine once and for all which nation is the greatest on earth, Mexico or Portugal.
And we found out what the new host country of the 2034 Men's FIFA World Cup will be after Australia. My friends, we are heading back to the Middle East. We are going to Saudi Arabia. That is right here on the Sports Cubicle. We're breaking down the news that came down the wire as Saudi Arabia has won the bid for the 2034 Men's FIFA World Cup. It's Paul Chivari. I'm Mike Mercado. And there's some things I want to talk about, Paulie, because it's interesting that we got to this point. We could talk about how technically the way that they're getting around, how does a continent host back-to-back World Cups? You can't do that. We'll get into that in a second. But I think we would be remiss if we just didn't bring up, because it's Saudi Arabia, whether it was Vince McMahon bringing those pay-per-views to them, whether it's them owning now EPL teams, making their own league, the
golfers,
that the sports washing has worked.
Yeah.
That it's officially happened. Saudi Arabia has kind of gone through the process.
Money talks.
Interesting how when unabashed, unbridled capitalism kind of takes over, how this all happens, and journalists get their bodies, bones sawed off. But here we are. We know what the World Cup is. We saw what happened with Qatar, and now we're at the point where Saudi Arabia will host it in 2034. For all those, you and I were talking about this, for all those who don't know, more in detail, but the way they got around this rule is so sneaky, because they're doing the three-continent thing, and you're going to say what those three countries are going to be in a second that are going to be hosting an Olympics, but the World Cup, excuse me. But this is so shady. FIFA has no morals. They have no shame. I can't even blame the Saudis. I mean, you're just going to give it to them, and you just got to make it unopposed, and, how can you blame them? This FIFA don't care.
I think if you want to at least, let's ignore all of the murkiness and give the silver lining to Saudi Arabia, they've definitely proven that they want to be an international sports haven.
They'll invest.
So, they'll invest, so, I mean, that's quite obvious with how many superstar soccer players are now playing over there. Cristiano Ronaldo, Karim Benzema, Jordan Henderson, so many guys.
Is Mbappe playing down there too?
Mbappe's still at PSG.
Okay.
And I think he's going to Real Madrid after the summer.
I was a little confused about that.
Yeah, but don't get me wrong. I think they offered Mbappe a stupid amount of money.
$1 billion, I think, because they couldn't get Messi.
The money that those guys are getting to be paid to play in the Saudi Premier League is way more than they were being offered to play in the English Premier League or La Liga or Bundesliga. So it's money is definitely speaking. It's probably grown Saudi Premier League to be a little bit more of a competitive league than it used to be before these guys got there, but they still have yet to be on the par of La Liga and Bundesliga and the English Premier League. It's interesting. I'm curious to see how this is going to get pulled off. We already know what a World Cup in the Middle East looks like with Qatar from a year ago, but at the same time, are we going to see the same shenanigans pulled? Are we going to see little tiny huts being erected just for people to live in? Are we going to see a government encouraging people to go to other places in the Middle East to stay at hotels and then fly in for the games that they want to see? Are we going to see Budweiser or any other corporate sponsor get told one thing only to have the rug pulled out from underneath them the week of?
So a little bit of context. I mentioned Australia, right? And a lot of thought was Australia was going to be the next host country.
Yeah.
What ended up happening is they actually withdrew from their bid, and that is how Saudi Arabia got there. So just a little bit part. This comes from CNN. Australia's withdrawal leaves Saudi Arabia as the only confirmed bidder. The Gulf nation announced its bid on October 4th, immediately following FIFA's surprise invitation for expressions of interest from only Asia and Oceania.
Now, why only Asia? Let me answer that for you. They have to rotate continents based on where the previous ones have been played. So last year was Qatar, so in 2026, the next one, they cannot have it in Asia. But that's okay because they're doing it in North America with Mexico, Canada, the United States, which means that the one in 2030 can't be held in North America or Asia. So that leaves Europe, South America, as the only ones remaining. Now, in 2030, that will be the 100th anniversary of the World Cup, which was first held in Uruguay back in 1930. So they're not going to have it in Uruguay, but they're going to have a game or two played. Commemorative matches, I think is what they're calling them, in Uruguay, Chile, and Argentina.
So it's Uruguay, it's Paraguay, and Argentina, and Spain, Portugal, and Morocco.
Which are the real hosts. The real hosts are Spain, Portugal, and Morocco. So, and the whole time I'm forgetting Africa. That's right, who hosted South Africa in 2010. Africa would have been due for another one. There were some other bids being put together. I want to say Egypt had one going with like Israel, and someone else.
Sure.
Which, of course, with everything going on right
things.
now, there's no way FIFA would be giving Israel. There's just not enough stability there to have a worldwide
too
event
volatile right now for in that sense.
So I think that checks the boxes for Africa by having Morocco host it with Spain and Portugal. But now that you have Europe and Africa hosting the event alongside, South America and North America not being able to host it back in 2026, that leaves only Asia. So as soon as Australia withdrew the bid, Saudi Arabia came in, swooped in. They have the money. They apparently have the venues, and I think they demonstrated that on the worldwide perspective that they have the interest to run this sort of thing.
Bringing all this up, right? Like we talk about what's going on the pitch, even the bids that were going on. Again, we'd be remiss not to talk about the human travesty that was going on back when Qatar was doing it, when they were building those new stadiums, those temp stadiums. And now we know, and you brought it up, that Saudi Arabia we know how stupid rich they are. We know how much that the family, the royals have in Saudi Arabia. And we know that they're going to invest in state-of-the-art stadiums. They're going to do all they can for the athletes, I believe. I think for all the superstars, because they are going to try to portray, especially for soccer, international soccer, like, hey, this is where you want to come and play. But I think just like in anything in the world, like imagine had they gone into Palestine, Israel at that time, like we have to mention if they went to South Korea, for the Olympics, like we have to talk about what's going around in a geopolitical sense. Now you and I, like, Lord knows we don't have.
Could you imagine if we were going into the World Cup in Qatar right now?
Yeah, but this goes to show that the human rights part of this doesn't matter to FIFA, doesn't matter to any of the governing bodies, and it does bring up an interesting point of where the Americans stand in Saudi Arabia now. We know how much history goes back between Saudi Arabia and the United States, and we also know how weird of a matchup it is. Like it's almost like a matchup out of necessity than it is like out of want. So I'm interested to see how many athletes from the United States are going to stand for certain things. And I only bring this up because in WWE, there were a lot of superstars that refuse a huge payday to go to Saudi Arabia because of political stance, whether it comes to gay rights, human rights, rights about other types of religion.
This might be different, though, because you're representing your country on the world stage, and you only get every 4 years to do it. I think it's
the Olympics of it.
It reminds me of the 1980 Olympics. How many, the U.S. boycotts the Olympics in Moscow, and how many athletes were upset that I trained for nothing all these years. Like this was my window. So
I mean, Jesse Owens against the Nazis.
Yep. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's always been a thing, right? Like these big world stages.
That predates the was it the invasion of Poland? So I think while the world was kind of aware of Hitler had not put himself on the scene like we all know him in hindsight to be. But that there's I guess that part of it too of like how much in defiance will we see people wanting to go there and compete and be their best in front of Saudi Arabia. Right. So I mean, as it gets closer, I mean we have 9 years until this happens, and I'm wondering if it's going to be another wintertime World Cup.
November World Cup.
So it's got to be. I mean,
the world could change so much in 9 years
absolutely.
too. Like the idea of because when you think about where Saudi Arabia was 9 years when it comes to the way it was handling sports, and we don't know what TV deals are going to look like. We don't know any of this. So I think there's just so much that's unknown about this deal. But I think it just puts into the spotlight how, and I'm going to go back to it. Just FIFA is so corrupt.
Absolutely.
And I'm not going to blame, you could take this out of context, but I'm not going to blame Saudi Arabia when it comes to this. If somebody gives you a deal you can't refuse, just too sweetheart of a deal, how do you not take it? How, if you're just going to give us for this price, of course we're going to take that deal.
Everything was building towards this for Saudi Arabia. I get that aspect of it, but I also get that, Saudi Arabia has skeletons in their closet, maybe
few.
Yeah, maybe physically.
Now, let me ask you this. How close are we to a Saudi Arabian majority but American-based team? In the next year, 2 years, will a NFL team, an MLB team, an NBA team be owned by the Saudis? I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say in the next year and a half, it's going to happen.
I'm going to say no, only because the other owners have to approve it. Yeah. And I think, whatever, we're going to listen to what all the BS, will be from those owners. But, okay, so I'm not going to say it'll never happen, but I'm going to say, like, the NFL, it's so hard to penetrate that fraternity. And then even in Major League Baseball, look at someone like Mark Cuban, who's demonstrated that he has the capital and has the know-how on how to run a professional sports franchise in the United States, and they still wouldn't let him buy the Cubs.
My big league that I think is going to happen, I've always put the baseball, the Major League Baseball aspect to it, because I think they're, unlike the NFL, you want as many, you want to bid up as many of these franchise evaluations as much as you can. I think it's only a matter of maybe months, maybe years, until Saudi Arabia and the entire government, that the funding that they use from there, buys an NBA team.
I could see NBA, but I can also see MLS will probably be the first one. I mean, let's say outside of the four major sports, I think it'll be MLS because that'll be the easiest. I think
they bought golf.
They bought golf already,
I mean, so it's right there.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't poach all of the best golfers.
But now they're teaming up. Now you got the PGA and Live Golf teaming up together.
And that was the funny thing, because I think in some people's reactions that didn't really understand what was happening were like, well, there's no way that Live is gonna to even survive this. PGA will live strong. PGA now realizes that they have a problem
because the PGA is a horrible ran organization, and if it wasn't for guys like Rory McIlroy, who actually stood up against Saudi, but also understanding how bad the PGA is towards its players.
But it's also, this is kind of the other side of the coin when you have like monopolistic, entities in control, like FIFA being one of them,
unbridled capitalism.
Yeah, exactly. It's wait until I'm trying to think what if there's an NBA or a basketball league that starts poaching some of the better players away. Think about that with the one and done rule. Think of like international basketball becoming stronger with guys getting poached straight out of college or guys getting poached straight out of high school. Be like, hey, why sit for a year and hope that you make it into the association? We'll just pay you more to play over here.
I mean, and that's why I think the NBA started the G League and started doing like these leagues where it's like the Ignites and whatnot, where it's like we need to make sure if Victor Wembanyama is in Paris, we don't want him going to the China League, the Spain League. Like, no, he needs to be here. But you're right. If there's one country that has shown that they're interested in this type of ploy, this type of play, this type of strategy, it's Saudi Arabia. They have unlimited funds, and quite frankly, it seems like the prince loves enough of himself and sports and being a celebrity that they're going to go all in on this. So I will say this, aesthetically, it's going to look beautiful. I think technology-wise, it's going to be ahead of its time. I think all the things are going to be there, except you got to be okay with who's running it and how we got to that scenario. But I think that's always the cause when we're talking about FIFA and the Olympics. Because how often are the World Cup and the Olympics picked in a very above board, right down the middle, honest type of thing? But, Paulie, any last thoughts on this crazy story?
Yeah, I mean, this is the world we live in now. So, I mean, I'll watch it because I'm such a simp for competitions. It was like, as much as I complained about the deaths in Qatar, I was very openly in the time saying, well, I'm part of the problem by watching this and enjoying this. I would wake up at 3 a.m. and watch Saudi Arabia beat Argentina, in the group play. I would watch every single match because they're timed where you can watch every single one as long as you have the availability to do it. You and I, we watched it here together one morning. It's unfortunate that it has to be this way, but at the same time, this is a great competition. It's a very beautiful international competition. Ideally, the world is supposed to come together in harmony and in peace. It's all we really got. So I support that aspect because I think the ideals of it is it's for peace and prosperity, but I hate the dirty, ugly murkiness that lies underneath it.
And you can guarantee this, that we will talk about the pageantry of the game, but we will talk about the realness of everything that happens outside of the pitch. And that's the only thing we can promise you as sports fans, but also as responsible broadcasters here on the Sports Cubicle. He's Paul Chivari. I'm Mike Mercado. We got a lot left here. Follow us on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV.
Maybe Saudi Arabia should host a Women's World Cup first.